I was reaching for a box of oatmeal when my legs stopped working. That's the clearest thing I remember about that Wednesday morning. The Kroger on Millbrook Avenue, the fluorescent hum overhead, my fingers still stretching toward that red and blue box on the shelf, even as everything else gave out beneath me. Someone caught my cart before it tipped. A woman in a green coat. I never learned her name. The next thing I knew, I was on the linoleum, and a stranger was kneeling over me saying, "Ma'am, stay with me, okay? I already called 911. I thought, what a kind thing for someone who doesn't even know me. The paramedics came fast. They put something on my chest, asked me questions I couldn't fully answer, told me I was having a cardiac event. I kept thinking about the oatmeal. I'd made a grocery list that morning. I'd had a whole plan for the day. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and ceiling panels, and a young man's voice telling me to keep my eyes open, keep breathing, just stay with him. I tried. I really did try. At the hospital, they told me my heart needed immediate surgery. A blockage. They needed consent forms signed. They needed family. They called my son 53 times over the next 3 days. He never picked up once. I didn't know that until later. What I knew was the surgery, or rather, I knew nothing about it at all. Anesthesia pulled me under somewhere around noon, and the next thing I saw was a water-stained ceiling tile and a window full of February gray. And Marta. She was asleep in the chair beside my bed, her reading glasses still on, a paperback open and face down on her lap. Her neck was bent at an angle that was going to hurt her when she woke up. I'd known Marta for 18 years. She'd moved in next door the same summer. My husband Clyde built the deck out back, and she'd been there for nearly everything since. She was 72 and retired, a former 4th grade teacher who still carried hard candy in her coat pocket out of habit. She was not my son. I must have made some sound because her eyes opened. She blinked twice, then her whole face shifted. Oh, thank God. She was on her feet instantly, reaching for my hand. "Oh, sweetheart, you're back." A nurse came and checked my vitals, explained what had happened, explained what came next. I listened. I nodded. I kept looking at the empty chair on the other side of the bed. "My son," I said when the nurse stepped out. "Has anyone reached him?" Marta's expression did something I couldn't quite name. Not sadness exactly, more like careful. "They've been trying, hon." I asked her to hand me my phone. She hesitated, then did. I didn't call Neil. I don't know why I didn't call Neil. Instead, I opened the app he'd shown me at Christmas 2 years ago so I could see pictures of my grandson Leo. He'd set it up himself, even put a shortcut on my home screen. I'd never posted anything, but I'd looked at his page 100 times just to see Leo's face. The most recent photo had been posted 36 hours earlier. Neil and his wife Roxanne, standing at the top of a ski slope somewhere, goggles pushed up on their foreheads, both of them grinning wide. The mountains behind them were enormous and white. The lodge in the background looked like something out of a catalog. The caption said, "Powder days and perfect runs, exactly what we needed." I stared at that word, needed. Below it, another photo from that same afternoon. Roxanne with a glass of red wine at a long wooden table, candles lit. Some kind of roasted meat on a platter. Leo beside her with a Shirley Temple, his gap-toothed smile aimed straight at the camera. Caption: "Best people, best mountain, 0 complaints." 0 complaints, while I was in surgery, while a hospital phone rang 53 times and went to voicemail 53 times. They had signal. You need signal to post photos. You need Wi-Fi to tag a location. There was nothing wrong with their phones. Marta was watching me. She'd seen whatever was happening on my face. "They knew," I said. The words came out flat, like I was reading from a list. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I put the phone down and looked out the window at the gray February sky and tried to remember the last time I hadn't felt like this. Like something people scheduled around rather than something they came to. It had started before Clyde died. Or maybe it had always been there and losing him just made the shape of it clearer. Clyde went in November 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. The last week, when the hospice nurse told me it was time, really time, I called Neil from the hospital parking lot, standing in the cold with my coat half buttoned, because I'd left the house so fast. He answered on the third ring. I could hear his keyboard in the background. "Dad's not going to make it through the week," I told him. "You need to come." There was a pause. Then, "Mom, I'm in the middle of this merger. It's been months in the making. I can't just walk out." "Neil." "He'll hold on. Dad's tough. I'll drive up Saturday." Clyde died on a Thursday morning at 6:14 a.m. with my hand in his and a hospice nurse standing quietly by the door. No Neil. I told Clyde he was on his way right up until the end. I don't know if Clyde believed me. I think he knew me well enough to understand what I was doing. Neil arrived Sunday. He stayed until Tuesday morning. He wore his work clothes to the funeral, a charcoal suit, cufflinks, and people told me how composed he looked, how strong. I stood there in my black dress thinking, he wasn't here for it. Composed is easy when you miss the hard part. After the funeral, he stayed exactly 43 hours. I know because I counted. Then he hugged me at the door and said, "You're tough, Mom. You've got this," and drove away, and I went inside to the silence of a house that still smelled like Clyde's coffee mug. I spent 2 years after that trying harder. More calls, more invitations, more excuses made for him when he canceled. Leo's school play in October, scheduling conflict. Thanksgiving, Roxanne's parents need us this year. Christmas shortened to 3 hours, lunch only, they had to get back for a party. Last spring, Neil called with a bright voice. I recognized as the one he used when he wanted something, or was building up to something. "Hey Mom, quick heads up, we're doing a ski trip in February, just the 3 of us and Roxanne's folks. Little family getaway." "That sounds wonderful," I said. When I hung up, I sat in Clyde's chair and let myself feel it for exactly 5 minutes. Then I got up and made dinner. I never mentioned it again. I told myself I was being gracious. Really, I was just tired of the conversation. Day 4 in the hospital, my friend Ethel came by with flowers from the church community and a tin of shortbread she'd baked herself. We'd known each other for 11 years. She sat in the chair Marta had vacated and held my hand and told me everyone had been praying. Then she said, slowly, the way you say something you've been rehearsing. "There's something I've been going back and forth on telling you." I waited. "Your son called me, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. Out of the blue, we barely talk, so it struck me as odd." She paused. "He was asking questions about you. How you seemed lately, whether I'd noticed anything concerning." "What kind of concerning?" "Memory things." She looked uncomfortable, confusion. "Whether you seemed sharp." He kept coming back to it. "Does she repeat herself? Does she lose track of dates? Does she seem like herself?" I told him you were as sharp as anyone I knew, and he said, right, in that way where you can tell they didn't want to hear your answer. I felt something cold move through my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. "He asked me not to mention it," Ethel said. "Said he didn't want to worry you. I've been thinking about it ever since." That evening, when Marta came back from checking on my house, she set a stack of mail on the mangable, the bedside table, and then stood there with her hands clasped in front of her, looking like she was about to say something she'd been holding for a while. "He called me too," she said, "your son, about a month ago. Same questions. Was I managing okay on my own? Had she noticed any falls, any confusion, any problems handling household things?" Marta had told him I'd helped her rewire her back porch light fixture 2 weeks prior and he'd gone very quiet. "He also asked about the house," Marta said carefully, "whether I thought it was too much for one person to maintain." I stared at her. She reached into her coat pocket and set a yellow envelope on my blanket. She'd found it in my mailbox that afternoon, mixed in with the utility bills. The return address was Cedar Ridge Memory Care, a facility over in Holt County. My name was printed in the window. I opened it. Inside was a glossy brochure. Smiling older people at dining tables, a garden path with a wrought iron bench, a caption about compassionate care in a home-like setting, and tucked behind the brochure, a placement inquiry form that someone had already started filling out. Patient name, my name, 68. 4 checkboxes, all marked: memory concerns, confusion and disorientation, unable to safely manage independent living. Family has documented concerns about patient welfare. Every single one, all 4, not one of them true. The emergency contact field was filled in with Neil's name and number in his handwriting. I knew his handwriting from 40 years of birthday cards and grocery lists left on my counters when he still used to visit. The postmark on the envelope was 9 days ago, 1 week before I collapsed in that grocery store. I held the form for a long time without speaking. Marta sat quietly, which is one of the things I've always loved about her. He called people to build a record, I said finally, asking if I seemed confused, getting them to say things he could use. Marta nodded. And then he was going to get me placed somewhere, while I still had the house, while the accounts were still in my name. I put the form down. He was setting it up before I even got sick. There was one more thing. Marta had picked up a stack of mail including 2 credit card statements addressed to me for accounts I didn't recognize. I'd never opened those cards. Someone had. Over 18 months, a little over $31,000 had moved through them. Furniture, electronics, cash advances in amounts that didn't match anything in my life. I'm a retired librarian. I spent 33 years shelving books and helping people find what they were looking for. I know how to follow a paper trail. Marta sat beside me while I held those statements. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Outside the window, the February dark had settled in. I need to make a call, I said. I'd worked with attorney Cecilia Grantham on Clyde's estate. She was methodical and plain-spoken, and she didn't waste words. When I called her the next morning and told her what I'd found, she was quiet for a moment. The credit accounts concern me more than the care facility, frankly, she said. That's potentially criminal. But both of them together, yes, I've seen this pattern before. What do you want to do? Everything, I said. I want to change everything. We spent an hour on the phone. When I hung up, I felt steady. That's the only word for it, not angry. Exactly. Not sad. Just steady, like a table that had found its 4 legs. On day 8, Neil called. The ringtone sounded twice before I picked up. I'd had time to prepare. Mom. His voice came out in a rush, high and urgent. Mom, oh my God, I had 50 messages, the hospital, I can't believe. Are you okay? What happened? I kept my voice even. I had a heart attack, Neil. Emergency surgery. I was unconscious for 3 days. We were in the mountains. The service up there, it's basically non-existent. You can't get a signal. You posted 4 photos while I was in the hospital. I didn't say it loudly. I just said it. I can see the timestamps. Silence. You had enough signal for that. More silence, then quieter. How are you feeling? Are you home? I'm home. I'd like you to come on Friday. There's something I need to discuss. He arrived at 10 in the morning, Roxanne with him, both of them in business clothes. He hugged me at the door. A brief, practiced hug, arms barely making contact. Roxanne said we were so worried and looked around the living room the way people look at things they're calculating. They sat on the couch. I sat in Clyde's chair. For 20 minutes, Neil talked about the ski trip, the altitude, the beautiful trails, how much Leo had loved the ski school. I let him talk. I watched his eyes move around the room the way they had when he was 16 and wanted something and was building up to asking. When I said I needed to discuss my estate, both of them went still the way people go still when they've been waiting. Of course, Neil said. That's wise. After something like this, you want everything in order. Absolutely, Roxanne said. I asked them to meet me at Miss Grantham's office Thursday afternoon. They agreed so quickly it almost made me sad. Marta drove me. She sat beside me in the conference room when they walked in, and I watched Neil's face shift when he saw her there. Confusion first, then something sharper. This is family business, he said. Marta is family, I said. Sit down. Miss Grantham began. I'd asked her to let me speak first. I laid it out the way I'd organized it in my mind during the long, quiet nights of recovery. The 53 calls, the ski photos, and their timestamps. I'd printed them, had them in a folder. Ethel's conversation, written down in Ethel's own hand on a signed statement Miss Grantham had helped me request. Marta's account, same format. The Cedar Ridge brochure, the inquiry, form with its 4 false checkboxes, Neil's handwriting on the emergency contact line. The credit card statements, the amounts, the dates, the 18 months. I didn't raise my voice once. Neil tried 3 times to interrupt. I held up my hand each time and he stopped. Maybe he heard something in my voice that was different from the mother he'd been managing for 2 years. Maybe he just finally understood that this was not a conversation he was going to steer. When I finished, the room was quiet enough that I could hear the heat running through the vents. Those credit cards, Neil started. I was managing some household things for you. You'd asked me to. I never asked you to open accounts in my name. I have the original card agreements. Neither of them has my signature. Roxanne put her hand on his arm. He stopped. Miss Grantham opened her file. We're here to formalize the revised last will and testament of. And she said my name, and I sat straight in Clyde's old posture, shoulders back, chin level the way he used to sit when he meant what he was about to say. She read the bequests one at a time. To Leo, my grandson, a protected educational trust, $80,000, to be administered by Ms. Grantham as independent trustee, accessible only for tuition and educational expenses, with no parental access or oversight until Leo's 18th birthday. Neil's jaw tightened. Roxanne's did too. They were doing the math. 80,000, protected. They couldn't touch it. To the Millbrook County Public Library, in memory of my husband Clyde, $40,000, designated for the children's reading program he'd volunteered with the last year of his life. To Marta, my neighbor and the truest family I've known in these past 2 years, $30,000, with my love and gratitude. Marta made a small sound beside me. I squeezed her hand. To my son Neil, $1. He looked up from the table. Miss Grantham read it again calmly. $1, explicitly named, not an oversight. You can't, Neil started. She absolutely can, Miss Grantham said. She slid a document across the table. Dr. Annalise Webb performed a full cognitive evaluation last Tuesday. Memory tests, executive function, orientation, the complete battery. Your mother scored in the 91st percentile for her age group. She let that sit for a moment. This will is ironclad. A challenge will cost you significantly more than you'd gain, and you will lose. Neil stood up, his chair scraped back hard. This is unbelievable. His voice had gone tight. We're your family. We came here today because we care about you. You came here because I mentioned my estate. I looked at him. I'd rehearsed this part less than the rest. This part just came. You have cared about what I own more than you have cared about me for a long time, Neil. I know that now. I think I knew it before I was ready to say it. Roxanne was gathering her bag. Neil was still standing. When you're old, he said, and his voice had gone cold in a way I didn't recognize, and you need someone, don't call me. I looked at him for a moment, at the son I'd raised, the child I'd read to every night until he was 9, and thought he was too old for it. At the stranger he'd become. I called you 53 times, I said quietly. You didn't answer. He left without another word. Roxanne followed. The door didn't slam. He was too controlled for that. It just clicked shut. The room was very quiet. Marta was holding my hand. Miss Grantham was making notes. Through the window, I could see the bare February trees and a strip of pale blue sky. I thought, I feel lighter than I have in 2 years. The credit card matter went to the county prosecutor's office the following week. I don't know how it will resolve. That part is out of my hands now. What I know is what happened in the months after. I sold the house in April. 40 years of memories in those walls, and I sorted through every one of them, kept what mattered, let go of the rest. Clyde's armchair came with me, his coffee mug, a photograph from our trip to Savannah in 1987, where he's laughing at something just off camera, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was. But I've kept that photo for 39 years because of the laugh. The new place is a condo, 2 bedrooms, 12 minutes from Marta. It's smaller than I need and exactly the right size. I volunteer at the library 3 mornings a week. I help the kids choose books, the way I spent 3 decades, helping adults find what they didn't know they were looking for. One of the kids, a girl of about 8, told me last week that I reminded her of her grandma. "Is that good?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, "my grandma's the best." I put that in my pocket and carried it home. Leo came to see me for the first time in late April. Marta had kept a quiet friendship going with his school librarian. Another librarian, it turns out, is easy to befriend, and word had reached Neil's younger sister, Patrice, who I hadn't seen in 2 years but who apparently had opinions about her brother's behavior that she'd been holding for some time. She brought Leo herself, knocked on my door on a Saturday morning, and stood on my new doorstep holding my grandson's hand. Leo looked at me with his grandfather's eyes, that exact warm brown, a thing I'd almost forgotten I was still going to see in this world. "Hi, Grandma. Mom said you moved." "I did," I said. "Come see." He walked through every room, looked at everything carefully, the way 9-year-olds examine a new space, and stopped in front of the refrigerator. "It's kind of empty," he said. "I just moved in." He considered this. "Do you have any juice?" I did. We sat at my new kitchen table and drank juice, and he told me about a book his class was reading, and a soccer goal he'd made that nobody believed, and a loose tooth that was taking forever. I listened to every word. He's come back 3 times since then. There's a plane ticket on my kitchen counter right now. New Orleans, first week of June. I've always wanted to go. The architecture, the food, the way the whole city seems to be in conversation with its own history. Clyde and I always said we'd get there someday. Someday became today. I am 68 years old. I survived a heart attack in a grocery store cereal aisle. I lost a son, though I've come to understand that what I lost was really just the idea of him. The version of him I'd been protecting in my mind long after the real one had already gone. And I found out in the starkest possible way who actually showed up. Marta showed up. Ethel showed up. A stranger in a green coat showed up and held my cart and called 911. The whole hospital nursing staff showed up. My grandson showed up, eventually, with his grandfather's eyes and a question about juice. People ask me if I'm lonely in the new place. I say, there's a difference between lonely and alone. I was lonely for 2 years inside a house full of memories, waiting for someone to choose me. Now I'm alone sometimes, in a quiet I chose for myself, and it's the least lonely I've felt since Clyde was alive. I've stopped making excuses for people who've already decided I'm not worth the effort. I've stopped auditing my own worth through the eyes of someone who was only ever looking at my assets. I've stopped shrinking. The oatmeal, by the way, I never did buy it that day. But Marta brought me a box in the hospital, tucked into the bag with my clothes and my reading glasses. Was the exact brand I'd been reaching for. That's the thing about people who actually love you. They notice what you were trying to get to, and they bring it to you.